Taifa Pension Fund.
You know what they say? Leave the party when it's still banging.
Relax. Leave it, huh? Sour. City?
Yes.
City. Why don't you welcome Irongo Hafton with the day's proverb?
I protest. With the Nigerians.
With the Nigerians?
Double protestation.
Over 1 million. 100 million.
Well, Latifa, now that you put it so well.
Your parents are rolling wherever they are.
Proverbs for the whole of this week are from the Republic of Kenya. You may have come across that country somewhere. Yes. And we are going to mention the proverb in Kiswahili. Then we will ask you, our esteemed guest, to tell us what you think the meaning is. Or rather the translation first, and then what you think the Kenyans are trying to say.
Okay.
Okay? Bahati ikikukataa hata kwa mganga haitafaa.
La, as the people in the coast would say.
Salale.
Kazi ngumu. So I would interpret this as if you are unlucky, don't bother going to a healer or a witch doctor. Literally. So for those of you that, as you're going about your neighborhoods and so on, and you see those signs that say, sperm count low, problem with your wife, not enough money, children not passing their exams,
business failing.
Yeah, call this number, right? So this is for you people out there who call those numbers. I think for me, what I would probably say is your circumstances are consequences of the choices you make and the actions that you take, which means nothing in our life is fortune necessarily, but it is purely a consequence of the decisions and the actions that you take. And that is a very good place to start talking about human rights and human rights defenders. Because ultimately, if we have a problem with the human rights violations in this country, there is no point going to a witch doctor or to a healer to explain the reasons for this. We need to look inwards and among ourselves to see where it is that we have dropped the ball.
Rumba, you seem to be focusing on witch doctors who solve problems. Well, they all do.
Including the other doctors.
Yes, some problems are darker than others, but when it comes to problems, you could direct a witch doctor to certain individuals.
And those are your problems.
Yes.
Direct the witch doctor to your problem.
Yes.
If your children are not passing the exams, talk to your children. Don't talk to a witch doctor. If you have less than a sexy life with your significant other, talk to your significant other. Don't go to a witch doctor.
Please.
If your stomach is a bit more rounded than you would like it to be, go to the gym. Don't go to the witch doctor. Can I continue?
I think we get it.
You get it?
You get it.
You don't get it.
It was a health cabinet secretary who gave us that. Huh? We got it.
Yeah, but
Bravery. Yes. Don't continue to treat this thing.
no Murray.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not normal.
Human rights is such a big thing in Kenya that institutions such as yours, Amnesty International, has an office here. We've got others, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. In fact, we came up with a constitution and input a Human Rights Commission in there to be a watchdog and make sure that we uphold human rights here. We've got the best Bill of Rights in the Constitution anywhere in the world, so they say. And yet, how are we doing in terms of upholding human rights in the country?
Yeah. So last night, as I was thinking about, what would be an interesting way to have this conversation, I took the trouble of actually looking at the Constitution very carefully. There are 193 pages in the Constitution. It refers to human beings in some form or the other, either citizens or people or persons, 600 times. So there are 3 times as many references to human beings in the Constitution as there are pages. The state is referenced at least 173 times. And human rights is mentioned 36 times. right? Which means that probably every 3 pages, is that roughly about every 6 pages, there's reference to human rights in the Constitution. So back in 2010, we took a very deliberate decision as a country, as a majority, because we voted for that Constitution, to enshrine human rights in the Constitution. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is just one institution. There are tens of other organizations, but I think sometimes one of the mistakes we make is to look at Amnesty International or to the Kenya Human Rights Commission or to the Defenders Coalition and think that's where human rights protection primarily sits. We are much more interested as Amnesty International in ordinary citizens who are taking actions on a voluntary basis to protect the people around them, to promote a sense of decency, to reduce the levels of fear and the amount of danger that our citizens face. So I think it's one thing to look at non-governmental organizations as being human rights organizations, but I think it's much more interesting to think about, individual actions that are being taken every day in the Republic. And secondly, those large associations like the Kenya Medical Association, like the Law Society of Kenya, like the ISPAC, the Accountants Association, or even the Architects Association of Kenya, and see them as human rights protectors. And then let me just say something that I'm sure will make people a little more stressed. I actually believe that every single police officer, if they are following their oath of office, they are human rights defenders. That's the demand that the Constitution makes of us. And in particular, Article 3.1 of the Constitution that says every citizen has an obligation to protect, defend, and promote the Constitution.
So, Irongo, when that is not happening, are we looking at a direct abrogation of the Constitution?
Yeah.
So hang on to that, because I think it's interesting that today in the Standard, yes, there is a special report. Robert Wanjala writes about, a lot of people who were abducted during the protests and goes into quite some depth about basically rights. So when we see that, it doesn't matter if we're talking about law enforcement or even the ordinary citizen, if something is happening to somebody else which is outside the scope of rights and how they are protected, so then everybody at some level then is abrogating the Constitution. Is that what you're saying?
Not everybody. I mean, our experience as Amnesty International is that there are small numbers of people who don't really care about the Constitution except to violate it. There are people who are essentially enamored or are really excited by the idea of power and privilege and what they can do to other people because they hold that power and privilege. But they tend to be the minority. Most of Kenyans are decent, they are hardworking, they are concerned about their families, they're concerned about their communities. They want a state that functions. They don't want to have to hemorrhage their financial capital every time one member of their family gets sick. That's the Kenya that is, for me, that I hold out for. There are a number of human rights violators. So as we're talking about the Human Rights Defenders Award, perhaps we should be giving not quite an award, but the reverse of award. I don't know if I have enough English. I can Google in a minute. But for human rights violators, I mean, who has violated the Constitution severally and significantly over 2024? And let's have an award ceremony for them as well, so that we actually do reverse, naming and shaming. The paper today covers the story of the abductions, 73 abductions, and probably about just over 20 people are still missing. Those abductions have been linked several times to a multi-agency task force. The task force is, according to the Human Rights Watch report that was released last week, is made up of national intelligence officers, military intelligence officers, Director of Criminal Investigations officers, and also anti-terrorism police unit. Every individual in that multi-agency task force has broken several laws when they abducted Kenyans during this period.
Yeah. And to make it worse, so, we saw before, this is interesting because I think the headline has changed a little bit now, is that we saw, armed masked men abducting, armed masked men kidnapping, people held for some time, abducted. But today there's another word, extorted. That even when you are in custody, somebody's saying, well, okay, if we're going to let you go or stop torturing you or stop beating you to within an inch of your life, Toa, give us something. So for me, that went off in my head and I said, on top of all of this, then still you're telling this man or woman or child to bring money so that you can let them go.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Several years ago, I met with a deputy governor, and I was complaining about, part of the city that I live, and I was like, these don't work, these don't work, these don't work. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Irungo, let me just give you a piece of advice, sitting as a deputy governor. Whenever the government does not work, corruption is at the center of it. The systems are deliberately made dysfunctional. They are destroyed in order that somebody can get a kickback. So wherever power is exercised, and in this case, abducting people, enforcibly disappearing them, or arbitrarily arresting them, wherever the law is violated, somebody will turn that into a money-making scheme. Now, I don't know whether it is that we just have we have too vigorous a small and medium enterprise culture in this country, that even people working for the public see that as an opportunity to create an SME at a roundabout or at a traffic light, or even in the circumstances we've seen. But I think we have to demand that without the rule of law, this country perishes, and it perishes not just because of violence, it perishes because of corruption.
You talk about the Human Rights Defenders Awards.
Right.
Tell us a bit about that.
So 8 years ago, 2016, a number of organizations came together under the auspices of the Human Rights Defenders Working Group. This is a working group that meets from time to time to look at the context within human rights defenders are working. Many of those HRDs, as we call it, are volunteers. They're not salaried workers with the opportunity of TAIFA pension scheme. There are people who just are concerned about their communities or their neighborhoods or their families, and began to think of an idea of how could we honor selflessness, how could we honor courage, how could we honor actions that are taken to protect others. And that's how the Human Rights Awards was developed. And again, they've been running for 8 years. The next award will be announced on the 29th of November. My ethics do not allow me to give you a sneak preview of who they are, but to suffice to say that hundreds of people are nominated. And last year, I think over 300 were nominated, and we're looking forward to see who will be the Human Rights awardees of 2024. So they're nominated by the public. So the organizations that are participating in the exercise will have, way back, I think in May, April, June, will have asked for nominations of people that, are deserving. And that goes through a very rigorous process. They're vetted, and then finally the difficult decisions are made, and people are awarded. Last year, there are several categories I should mention. There is a lifetime award. Last year it went to Senior Counsel Paul Mwite. I teased a young emerging leader the other day and said, do you know Paul Mwite? And they said, yeah, vaguely. He's the one who does election petitions. I said, well, before he did election petitions...
is he the Rigiji guy?
He was also involved in the impeachment process. I said, for 50 years, he did human rights work. And 50 years is probably double the life experience of most Gen Zs. And he got the Lifetime Award last year.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So several categories of people who are then recognized.
Yeah.
What is the basis for recognition? And even for nomination. I mean, so if you... for next year, because the nominations I'm sure are closed for this year. So for next year, when you ask people to now start thinking and nominating those that you think are human rights defenders, what is it that you should consider?
Yeah, I mean, I've still got the booklet. I keep all the booklets for the last 2 or 3 years that I've been able to attend. But you've got, for example, Lisa Gem, who was preteen. I think she's not yet a teenager, but she was a young emerging human rights defender, and she got the work largely for promoting child rights in her school and in her community. And then you've got, for example, 2022, John Alanamo got it for his work around investigative journalism and telling those stories that the powerful and the privileged just don't want us to hear. So he did that work. But you've got other people. So the Social Justice Traveling Theatre, this was a collective award. They got the award as upcoming human rights defenders. And of course, what they do is they do street theatre, right? So they actually dramatize some of the fiction that is fact in this country. if I can put it that way. And then the HRD Award of the Year went to a young man from Turkana, and his name is Epakan Ekale, and he's a really remarkable man. What he does is he works primarily with the communities around peace and peace building. So where there's been tension within Turkana between the different ethnic communities, he's come in and created dialogues between them. He also is a climate change warrior. He is very concerned about the impact on Lake Turkana and, of course, the increasing desertification of Turkana. And lastly, he has done quite a lot of work on social accountability, exposing corruption. And for his and their, for their efforts, many of them were arbitrarily arrested. Some of them would have been taken to court. But as the committee often says, it is not a precondition that you need to be tear gassed, abducted, and detained for you to be an awardee. What is important is that you have actually stood up for others. That you have stood up for people with disabilities, you've stood up for sexual minorities, you've stood up for women, girls, you've stood up for an environment that works and a climate smart governance culture. So I think that's the criteria that's put out every year.
So you have many such people across the country?
Oh, hundreds.
Okay.
Hundreds.
After this break, you'll tell us what drives such people.
Yeah.
What is it that drives them? I mean, is it money? Is it... are they seeking political office? So they're starting somewhere. So they're entering into politics. What is it that drives these hundreds of people who are rights defenders across the country? Irongo Houghton, Executive Director, Amnesty International Kenya, is our guest today. We are talking about human rights promotion and recognizing defenders of justice, the Human Rights Awards that will be taking place on the 29th of November. Ndu,
Yes.
I will tell Irongo about the metallic card and how you can get, this is a big man,
So there's a place
He's executive director, He requires private banking.
There's a lot of energy going into Amnesty this morning. We are terrified to be here.
There's a place where you would go and you say, you know what? I have worked so hard. Now, please, here is my money. Handle it for me. Show me where to invest. Show me how to plan. Show me how to, get education things all sorted out. And they said, you know what? Come into one of our private suites and have a conversation with one of our world-class financial advisors. In a private manner, you tell them what they want, they'll sort you out. And it is for this reason, these fantastic conversations that they've been having, that they've been named Kenya's #1 private bank. It's Stanbic Bank. So getting into this system where all your things are taken care of, you can plan wisely, you can live joyfully, you can bank easily just because of Stanbic. And sorting out your things for you. When you travel, they say, okay, you just go. We'll sort out the rest. You need to get ideas on where to put your money in the future. Tell us, what are you thinking? They'll give you the options and it'll be sorted out for you. It's great stuff. They're also telling somebody else, if you can think of those 4 elements that Stanbic is pushing, we'll give you 25,000 bob this week. Because you opened an account and you said, no, this is how I will use the 4 elements of living joyfully, banking wisely, planning, like that. 25,000 bob. Invest, and then the metallic card. By the time they reach your level now, they give you a card. Literally, it's a metallic card. It just looks rich, the card itself, before you even put it anywhere.
Even if the balance is low.
Don't even worry about it.
It doesn't understand balance.
It doesn't understand balance. It understands infinity.
So when you overspend, it also takes care of that?
Yes.
Don't worry.
With that card, you can't possibly overspend.
I only ever saw a metallic card once, and that was with the late DJ CK Chris Kirubi, whose card I swear we could have sold.
His own business card.
His own business card. I could have sold it in the streets of Nairobi.
Chris Kirubi, Chairman, International House Limited. Plus the very many other things. Now he couldn't add all those chairman, just one.
And had a paper card.
Very good.
Business card.
26-10.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. The weather with Spice FM.
Still a bit of a cloudy morning in Nairobi.
This November, the Kipawa Cup is set to ignite the passion of young football stars. Organized by Sakata Soccer Stars Football Academy in partnership with Standard Media Group, this will be a celebration of talent, teamwork, and limitless potential. Over 200 teams comprising boys and girls aged 4 to 17 will battle it out in a spirit of sportsmanship, fun, and friendship. From November 29th to December 1st, 2024, come and witness thrilling matches and cheer on rising stars at the Nairobi Polo Club. Partner with Kipawa Cup 2024 and align your brand with a legacy of positivity, inclusion, and the next generation of football champions. Contact Caroline Nyandieka on 0723-803-601 to embark on this incredible journey. Kipawa Cup 2024, where football, fun, and family unite.
I received an invitation to David's housewarming party.
They invited everyone, like every single person they know.
I'm sure he wants to show off his brand new mansion.
You look great!
I want to make a good first impression on my date.
Jill, meet Dina's friend, Gabby.
There's still something new to discover in Baguio, something to love, someone to love. I'm so glad that you're here tonight. Son, I've missed you so much.
Gabby, this is David. David. Gabby.
You saved my life. I'll never ever forget it.
Get ready for a roller coaster ride of love, betrayal,
You are such a liar! You're the liar here!
and intrigue.
Listen, this place
Welcome
is
to the
not
world
over,
of soap
Jesse.
operas, where passion runs
I
deep
will get my revenge. I will get back on all of you.
and secrets abound.
If I did something wrong, I only did it because I wanted to protect our family.
From scandalous affairs to bitter rivalries,
Why do you always only see my faults? I'm sorry if I was not as smart as you.
KTN Home Soap Operas is your guilty pleasure destination for all things drama. Brace yourself for shocking revelations,
Lucas! You're heartless!
I'll see you
You're a
all
monster,
burning
Lucas.
in hell.
and unforgettable moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat.
It was love that caused my downfall.
Don't miss a single episode of your favorite soap, where every twist and turn is more captivating than the last.
Show me where she is right now!
Please, calm down.
Where is your mistress?
Come here. Please.
Get your hands off me!
KTN. Welcome home.
The job. And then the last one, I think, is, a sense of shame. This is the strange one. It's the one that brought me to this work many years ago. I was 16. I was standing in a bus at a bus stage, and a woman, 4 persons down, got attacked by a woman who I think now was probably somebody who was mentally unstable. And she literally pulled out this woman's hair by the roots. And we were 10 in the line. And nobody came to the protection of this woman in the front, including myself. I was 16 at the time. And as this woman who attacked her got exhausted, and she literally got exhausted, she was allowed to continue until she got exhausted. She walked off, leaving this woman crying and bleeding from the hair roots. And she turned around to all of us and she said, "Why didn't one of you protect me? Why didn't one of you stop this woman from doing this?" And the sense of shame I had as a 16-year-old was sufficient that even now I still get goosebumps when I tell the story, because it reminds me of a time when I had the power to interrupt something and I didn't, and somebody got hurt as a result. And I think that's the other driver that many people have, that they saw something, they took no action, and they saw the consequences of that playing out. The last one, of course, and let me be real with this, is that some people think that by doing human rights work, you'll get a job in a human rights organization. Now, I usually like to say to people, Amnesty International has a staff profile of 25 staff. We don't have the capacity. We would love to recruit hundreds of Kenyans, send them to all 47 counties, but we don't have that capacity. So we have to build a culture that is voluntary and that is professional but voluntary, and able to do things on the back of whatever it is that people are doing. So a lot of our members are doctors, they're journalists, they're lawyers, they are mama boga, they are, their whole set of backgrounds. But there is a thought that this could lead to, being the executive director of Amnesty International Kenya, which is what I encourage people. This job is temporary for me.
You have a membership?
We have a huge membership. We are 3,000 strong.
How does one apply to be a member?
Okay, here we go. Take out your pens, everybody. Pull out your gadgets on television, including you, sweetie. Go to amnestykenya.org and go to that page that says Join Us. It's painless. You will part with a little bit of mobile money, but essentially you can become a member.
What does membership mean?
So membership for Amnesty International essentially is an opportunity for you to be part of a movement that is committed to the Constitution and to the rule of law. It gives me the power when I speak because I'm not speaking simply as somebody who manages a team of 25 people, who is accountable to now a Kenyan board, but I speak on behalf of members and supporters throughout the country. The other thing is it gives you the opportunity to be among other members in local localities. So we've got 109 chapters in universities, in communities, and in secondary schools all over the Republic. So that's the side of things. But I think, for other organizations like Defenders Coalition, they have a huge network of, human rights defenders all over the country, and they protect them, they train them, they keep their morale high and support them when they need that. And it's the same for the Kenya Human Rights Commission. For IMLU, the Independent Medical Legal Unit, they do work mostly around medical related issues, torture. They help with postmortems. Many of the postmortems sadly of the cases that we've seen in the last 4 months have been independently verified by IMLU and others, and there are many others.
I want to go back to your personal story, if you will allow me. So you've just told us, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And you've carried it all these years.
Yeah. From
17 years old, now you're 75 years old.
I'm so glad you're not sitting KCSE this year.
But then you look back at many of you who stood and watched as something was happening and you did nothing.
Yeah.
When you look back at yourself, why didn't you do something?
Yeah. So I have another story, which is 6 years ago. A black cat walked across our garden, and we have, just to make it clear, because I'm sure people are like, Amnesty Director, maybe 5 acres of a garden. We're talking about less than, a quarter of an acre. It's very little. In fact, if anything, I can cut it I can cut the grass with a toothbrush, or I can comb the grass with a toothbrush. But this cat walked across the garden, and we watched it. It was a stray cat, and we watched the tension between that cat and our neighbor's cat and didn't intervene. And then 2 weeks later, I was burying our neighbor's cat because the cat that walked across our garden had not been, managed. And then that cat killed one of the cats that lived in the compound of where we live. And I often say that, sometimes we don't take action when the things that are threatening us are lizards. And then one day they grow into crocodiles, and then they're too big for us to deal with. So my life advice to 56 million Kenyans is deal with the lizards when you can, because if you don't, they become crocodiles. And we've seen this in some ways. If you look at some of the life biographies of the people who are occupying parliament or the executive or other, to some extent even the judiciary, people who showed us from a very young age that they were incapable of handling public resources or protecting the public. And then they have moved into positions of power and authority, and they have betrayed the oath that they took when they took those positions. So I think it's very important. I'm not calling them lizards, please let's not go there, or crocodiles. But I am saying that it is really important that we actually think about how to intervene quickly and at the point of a violation, so that it does not grow into something bigger than we assume. So to go back to your point there about abductions, what may have started off as a security operation, this would be the argument, I think, of the multi-agency task force, has now turned into a corruption, rent-seeking, extortion operation. It was not intended that way by the people that probably gave the authority and the instructions to do this. But anything that is unlawful inevitably metastasized. Is that the word we use for cancer? It spreads to something else and becomes so big that you're unable to control it. We've seen this from history.
Who protects human rights defenders, and who should protect them?
Let me start with who should. So human rights protection is a constitutional obligation. 3.1 of Article 3.1 of the Constitution says that we all have an obligation to protect the Constitution. So if you are blowing the whistle on corruption, if you are stopping marine trawling, if you are stopping smuggling of human trafficking, if you are stopping the killing of our elephants and our wildlife, you are a human rights defender. If you are protecting children against pedophiles, you are a human rights defender. So the Constitution actually passes that obligation to all state organs to do that. The reality in Kenya today is that I can't think of a institution that goes out of its way boldly to protect the human rights defender. Possibly the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, which has that as its mandate and has been playing an important role during this period. But I think it's important to recognize that actually this work has largely fallen to non-state actors. So human rights organizations, they have a huge obligation. But I really feel that actually leaving this work to human rights organizations, of which there are probably no more than 50 in this country, is a cop-out. What we need to see is families protecting human rights defenders. We need to see families supporting human rights defenders. Increasingly now the funding that's coming into human rights organizations is dwindling. Therefore, we have to think internally. And I think we have to cause a few muscles to grow within the Kenyan body that would allow for Kenyans to be able to contribute to human rights work. So if you are concerned about corruption in this country, there's a place where you can put your little dollars or shillings or whatever it is. If there is a thing that, if you're concerned about child protection, there's a place you can put that. If you're concerned about the environment, there's also a place where you can fund organizations to do this work. And I think that's where the work over the next, 1 to 3 years needs to go, which is to find ways of allowing Kenyans who may not want to do the human rights protection work themselves directly.
But they want to support.
Yeah, CT with his the metallic card. May want to just swipe it on an Amnesty website and say, bro, I am not sure if I'm going to the streets, but
I support those.
But I support who are going to, people going to the streets. Or I would like to support a piece of research that looks into the issue of how we stop abductions.
I think we've seen just with the Gen Z and the millennials and the other Kenyans during these protests recently, that people are willing to actually put in 10 bob, 20 bob, 100 bob, 2,000 to support those who are putting themselves in the front line and saying, let's support and let's see. Then the question that comes inevitably out of it is the accountability for it.
Right.
So how do we encourage then the accountability from the recipients, from those that are being supported by the people?
I mean, the first thing is just say this is not complicated because Kenyans are, organizing Harambes all the time.
Yep.
We raise money in WhatsApp groups. In fact, one of 3 purposes of a WhatsApp group is to raise money.
Yes.
I'm not being rude, it's true. So we're doing this all the time. It is no different to raise money for a human rights related violation than it is to raise money for an unfortunate incident that has happened in a family, In fact, if anything, I think it is probably even more strategic to start looking at the big issues. So the question we must be asking is why is private and public health, well, first of all, why is private healthcare so expensive, right? Why are we not protected when our loved ones go in, particularly for terminal care? Yeah. And we are in that finance accounting room, and we're trying to understand the list of things that are now on this medical bill. And we have no capacity to do that. Why is that the case? Why is it the case that public health at the moment is in such a shambles? Now, you can support people who need medical help today, and that's fine, but you will be doing this tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that. If you put a similar amount of money into an organization that is looking at health-based corruption fraud, you are actually beginning to fix the problem that may lead you to a point where you never have to come out of pocket in order to fund this. This is the point that I've been raising with diaspora communities and with Kenyans, is that if we start thinking more strategically, then actually we can reduce the medical catastrophes that we see every day. So this would be a suggestion.
We are quick to trust right? And that's why someone opens a WhatsApp group and you're like, all right, so let me see the purpose of it. And you buy
You go into the group before you know the purpose.
Yeah, you go into the group because, the person who's invited you into the group is somebody you know, right? So, you get into the group and then you see what the issues are and you're willing to contribute. And as long as there's somebody there, the secretary or treasurer is listing all the time, we've received X amount from Irongo, X amount from Eric, and you're fine. And this is the bill that we are working towards. You're okay with it.
Right.
And if there are no issues that emanate at the end in terms of, we contributed, but only 20,000 went to the cause that we're contributing for, and the others, then you start having issues. So I want you to speak to the human rights defenders who would like to fundraise this way.
Right.
You want to crowdsource for just support. But then how do you maintain the trust of the people that are contributing towards this? What are these things that you should do?
I think there are 4 things. The first is have a clear objective and make it measurable. So one of the gripes that I have with many of these groups, they don't tell you how much we're raising. It's just an open-ended,
there's no budget, there's no target.
Yeah, so at some point I get a feeling that I need to be looking at the cars that people are driving afterwards to see whether the hubcaps have changed also, So I think the first one is clear objectives, make it measurable, make it financially, measurable. The second one is have a clear target for the number of people you want to put into the group. So be clear who it is that is concerned about this issue and find ways of transparently reporting back to them regularly. The third thing I think, which is as important, is thank people. Too many of these groups, I think somehow we contribute and then after a while we see our contribution has been listed and then we stop going into that group.
And then you've been removed.
And then you're somehow removed. And so I think, thanking people is a really important thing because people want the confidence to give again also.
Yeah.
The last one, I think, is documenting it in a way in which people can go back and see it. And one of the things that I found so inspirational about Hanifa's work, Hanifa the activist, was that she raised somewhere in the range of just over 30 million shillings. And most of it was small amounts, but many people, is that she actually got it audited, and of course, if you're raising only, if you're only raising 200,000, audit on that may be a bit expensive. But if you're dealing with large volumes, then having independent auditors and putting that in the public domain, I think is really important. And that, I think, is the culture that we can create.
There's always this question that arises when we talk about human rights. It sounds facetious, but then it has to be asked. Are we a people who have been abused so often that we've gotten to a point where we actually identify with our abusers? Because
Stockholm syndrome.
Yes, Stockholm syndrome. Because when you talk of corruption, when we hear corruption, and there's a discussion, the details of it, do we then remind ourselves of some untidy situation that we got ourselves into? Or some policeman whom we bribed so that we could get out of a sticky situation, or some money we paid so that some child can get admission, whatever it is that we did, so that when we hear someone else's situation, we are loath to actually criticize or do what we need to because we know now. What I'm describing is a good thing because it means we have a conscience. But are we captive? See, this is the question because we know what is wrong and what is right. It's not that we don't know, we do know. The disconnect we now have with our children is we taught them wrong and right, and they don't seem to see us practicing it.
Yeah.
And that causes a very serious disquiet.
Yeah. So I have a friend who had a very uncomfortable conversation with her daughter, and the daughter was 6. And the daughter came up to the mother one day and said, Mommy, I don't understand why I need to do homework and I don't know why I need to go for exams. Why don't they just give me the results?
Surely.
And if you think about it, it's not really a very illogical question to ask, right? In Kenya today. The mother stopped. In fact, I don't think that conversation went on for much longer. The mother stopped and thought, let me step back and think about how I want to have a relationship with my child. Because obviously what I am not doing is I am not creating a sense of values in my children. So the starting point, I think, is who are the value carriers in Kenya today, right? And the reality is we can name the vice carriers. There are many, right? But the question is
vice or value?
No, vice and value, I usually keep them very separate. That's a good point. We Google. Okay. So vice carriers, I have them as many. These are the people who think about accumulation, they think about self, they're the people who think about destroying public institutions for private greed. They will steal, if given the chance. They steal from their relatives, they steal from their loved ones, and even within the family, they misuse family resources or use family resources in a non-transparent way, right? So this is the point I think you're raising, CT, which is really, the challenge we have as a country. Some of this is huge. It is intergenerational. But I think what we would say as Amnesty is that, we have given ourselves the tools within which to be able to create a society that keeps everybody dignified, safe, and out of fear. That tool primarily is the Constitution. If we follow that in the different organizational spaces that we're in, our schools, our hospitals, our banks even, and our government offices will operate in a manner in which they operate for us rather than for the people who happen to be there. So I think, the challenge for human rights defenders is not just simply to focus on reactively to human rights violations. It is to create norms and values and a culture that actually is the mainstream that is based on human rights. And I think that's the work that human rights defenders will do. And for those people who are worried about the more, I guess you'd say, the more risky work of human rights defenders, the calling out, the marching in the streets, the the naming and shaming, the exclusive reports, those kind of things. If you don't want to support that work, then my request is support the work that is producing a culture that reduces the space for people to steal from us.
Do you think government should, because this government who has the
ultimately
most
it's
power,
government,
it is, right? Should then have a bit of egg on their face or a bit of stain of shame that there are so many human rights defenders? Because I imagine that if it was a more secure space, you would have less human rights defenders. Should government not feel a bit off that there are so many?
I think they should feel definitely off that there's so many, but I think they should feel even more off that there's so many human rights violations. I mean, I think that's what I would be. If I was the Interior Minister and I had those statistics, 73 abductions, 61 deaths, 1,679 arbitrary arrests, I would have cause for disease, for not
disease.
Disease, yes. Actually, that's a great word. So it's both dis-ease and disease.
Yes.
But
isn't that what sickness is?
It
is
lack of it.
Yeah.
If you interact with violations as often as we seem to do in this country, there's the question of the effect it has on us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how it manifests in the way we deal with violations.
So then there is something wrong then, isn't it, Irongo? Because how can you? I imagine a situation that when you were 16 gives you goosebumps.
Right.
How then can you sit with compounded issues over and over and over and over again in an institution that is actually supposed to ensure that those things don't happen? It must do something.
So this is the reverse question to the question you asked me earlier, which was why do human rights defenders do human rights defending? Why don't Kenyans defend human rights? Primarily, they're frightened because the consequences are quite harsh. This is what we're seeing among what was a waking up, a generation of young emergent leaders that had woken up. They were smashed by the full weight of the state, right? So you have traumatized that generation of leadership. Now, the thing we know from history is that they will still come back. The second thing I think is that people feel that they will not succeed. And I think that's the thing that we have to keep encouraging Kenyans to experience is their power starts with standing up. And as I keep saying, if the National Heroes Council never gives Irongo Houghton a Human Rights Award or a Shujaa Award, if the Human Rights Defenders Award never gives Irongo a award, it doesn't really matter, because the work that we do is not for recognition. It is because we can look back and those twilight years, those sunset years of our lives, and say, I played my role at a point when the country needed me. And I'm sure every single state officer, as they go to their grave, as they are sitting, lying in their bed for the last time, and thinking about their lives, they will not be present to the money they raised, to the people they cheated. They will be really thinking about, did I leave this country a better place or a worse place? Was I a good leader? Do I see leadership that has emerged that is good? Or have I essentially taken the country to the dogs?
Well said. Again, the Human Rights Awards will be on the 29th of November. We'll look out for those and see who are recognized, and let's all appreciate them. Irongo Houghton is the Executive Director for Amnesty International Kenya. He's been our guest. Thank you for being our listener throughout the show today, and asante sana for following. We'll be back tomorrow morning, God willing, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's now 10:01.
Spice up your life.